So I have to confess, I put up a Christmas tree a little early this year. I won't decorate it because it's so early, but I just love the warm glow of the lights and the ambiance, and it's like a great big night light. And last night, as I was sitting there enjoying the lights, I got in my feels a little bit and was just kind of processing and reflecting on some things. And I got a little teary-eyed, had a good cry, which is good to do on occasion. And the dog I'm babysitting, he's kind of old and grumpy. He doesn't really like to cuddle, but he saw that I was crying and he came over and he put his paw on my hand and sat there with me and held my hand while I had a good cry and we enjoyed the lights together. And I was so thankful for his gesture of kindness from the grumpy old dog. And those of us who have been targeted for some time, we really come to appreciate those small gestures of random kindness from a stranger, or the small tender mercies, each day that we have what we need, that we have food to eat and a roof over our head, and that we're safe and that we're healthy. These things become so precious to a targeted individual because they're threatened in every area of our life. Every area of our life is under siege, under attack by those seeking to literally destroy us. And today I'm going to be talking about the attacks financially, both in a smear campaign and in the physical upon a targeted individual. And in the smear campaign, they're trying to portray us as, unstable, unemployed, homeless, strung out on drugs, erratic, mentally ill. They're trying to paint this picture that we're, a violent criminal, can't be trusted, we're just the worst villain ever. And then behind the scenes, they're doing everything they can to make it look like that's a reality, because if they've portrayed this false narrative to the public and community, law enforcement, the court system, whoever they're committing this fraud toward, they've got to make it match, because if we're showing up at a job every day and looking stable, it's going to negate the false narrative that they've told. And so, they're going to attack the livelihood of the targeted individual, because if they can block our access to financial resources, all other areas of our life are going to start spiraling. And so they're going to call up the job out of concern and say things like, I think they might be on drugs, or they might be committing crimes, or I think they might be under investigation, even though they're the ones trying to get the targeted individual investigated. And they'll reach out to coworkers on LinkedIn at the same place of employment and try to instill fear and skepticism in them and make the work environment totally hostile, because it'll be full of flying monkeys now that are monitoring and concerned. And the goal is to get the victim either fired or ran out of their job. And then if they take the smear campaign online in a cyberbullying situation and smear the victim's name with all this horrendous defamatory information that's, false, it'll make it not only difficult for the victim to have employment in the here and now, but indefinitely in the future. Once it's on the World Wide Web, they've done permanent damage to that victim. And then if that's not enough, they're going to start attacking the housing stability of the victim. So going to the neighbors, the landlord, if there is one, I'm concerned they're prostituting out of their home or selling drugs out of their home, or, whatever they can do to instill fear in the community around the targeted individual. So now they have a whole new slew of flying monkeys that are uncomfortable having that victim in the area now. They want to drive them out. So the victim's being driven out of their job, they're being driven out of their housing. And the goal is to make the victim so focused in crisis mode, in survival mode, making sure their basic needs are met, that it becomes much easier to commit theft and hidden court cases and entrapment and all the other things they're doing behind the scenes, because the victim's so distracted just trying to get by day to day. And in my situation, I had rented in the same location for 5 years without any incident. I had a very cordial relationship with my neighbors and my landlord. In fact, my landlord had written me a very nice letter of recommendation, because I was in the process of trying to buy a home when my targeting began. And that all changed when the targeters, spread the flying monkey activity to my neighborhood. And then suddenly I had people peering in my windows. Anytime I'd leave, it was being reported and I'd be followed. My garden was being ripped out. My vehicles were being vandalized. And there was entry allowed in and out of my home whenever I would leave. So people would be coming in and taking things, planting things, putting recording devices in my home. It was a lot of nefarious crimes occurring in a place that should have been safe and secure for me. And so it became necessary for me to flee that community because all areas of my life were becoming very dangerous. And, I didn't have a plan. I just had to go and trust that it was all going to work out. Kind of like the Israelites that fled bondage, that fled servitude from Egypt and went into the wilderness following Moses. They didn't know how they were going to eat or what the plan was. They just had to trust. And, they were provided daily manna, enough for the day, their bread for the day. And that's kind of what happens when you are a targeted individual that has to flee, is you just have to trust and be grateful each day that your needs are met. And, as if all that is not hard enough, once you get to a new community, it's not like you can go apply for a job. They're going to want to check your references. And if your past employer is a flying monkey, they'll find out where you're at. Or you go apply for housing, they're going to want to talk to your last landlord. Again, a flying monkey that's going to report back your whereabouts and place you in danger at your new location. So it's very challenging because whether you stay or whether you go, there's going to be obstacle after obstacle. But I think the blessing in that is those of us who've been targeted and come out on the other side tend to be some of the most resourceful, innovative people you'll ever meet. We know how to stretch a $20 bill at the grocery store. We know how to really be humble and grateful for the smallest blessings that we get to enjoy. And on top of all that, the targeters will attack us financially. They may access our bank statements and find out where we are that way and monitor our spending, pocket watching. They could withdraw from our bank account. They could commit financial crimes, financial fraud, and do it in our name with our personal information with the intention of setting us up for crimes. So they could be applying for PPP loans, excuse me. They could be doing GoFundMe, fundraisers and getting into business contracts as if the targeted individual to try to set them up to look a certain way, like they're committing financial crimes. And, they could take it even further and go to the court system and lie and say, yeah, they're homeless and we can't find them to serve them. Therefore, we're going to have to take their inheritance. They're not participating in this probate case, or they're incapacitated and homeless. We need to take conservatorship and control over their resources. And they'll go to great lengths to just destroy every financial area of the victim's life. But just like the lights on the Christmas tree, each of those lights is like one of those little individual daily blessings. Each day that we get to lay our head down and be safe and get a good night's sleep and have what we need is like one of those lights. And as we're grateful for them, it invites more light into our life. And I've had countless experiences where a tender mercy or a miracle has occurred. I get a text message that said, back in 2010, we mischarged you for a fee at the bank, so we've credited that amount, or just small things like that that would help me along my journey, because they certainly don't want us to have the resources to be able to get an attorney to help us navigate through all the things we're going through. They need us broke. They want us to be on the streets, riddled with addiction, unstable and falling apart and ultimately destroyed to match that storyline. But also on a Christmas tree, there can be a dark dudded light, and it makes the whole section of the tree go dark all around it. And if we focus on the negative things, on the duds, we'll invite more darkness. That darkness will surround us. But as we choose to focus on the light and be a light, we'll invite more light and more blessings into our life. And I believe that those of us who have been through this, who've had everything stripped from us and had to start our lives over from scratch, I really believe that as we stay grateful and keep pressing forward, that everything will eventually be restored to us tenfold.